is made possible by contributions to the Big Tugg YouTube channel by viewers like you. Thank you. Also, Juicy Juice, I think, sometimes. And Fume, but we will get... it comes later.
I am very sick. I do not feel good, but this video must be created because people need to know about Elmo. When you mention PBS to someone my age, a certain image is painted in their head. Waking up on a chilly Sunday morning and running downstairs, turning on the TV and watching Arthur the Aardvark be an extreme hater to his sister DW. Watching some Mexican kids hang out with dragons without their parents' permission. They had no clue what they were up to. And hearing Gilbert Gottfried play a robot pigeon while a green dude tries to kill a bunch of middle schoolers. But even though that might be the collective base knowledge, the public broadcasting service has a lot more going on than you might think. It is a crowd-funded educational entertainment provider that has been around for decades. And I say crowd-funded even though myself and anyone I know has never given a dime to PBS, so I don't know where the money's coming from, really. Our broke asses won't even pay for YouTube Premium even though we get 7 ads in the middle of the video, so I doubt any of us are just shilling out for Big Bird's healthcare. But even though we're all mooching off the teat of free TV, there's a high likelihood that PBS has been a major part of your life. Odds are you learn just as much from the early education programming on public TV than you did your checked out kindergarten teacher who's so hungover they can't even talk. Programs like Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and Clifford have entertained and educated generations of children. Clifford being the least out of the 3 in terms of education. I don't know what you learned from Clifford. Don't have a gigantic dog, he's gonna do property damage, and you can't afford that. And all those PBS kids grew up to be smart-poking adults who enjoyed sitting down and getting their brains exploded by episodes of Nova, or just love to sit down and vibe out while you watch Bob Ross paint some trees. Yeah, right, Bob. I know you think you're a professional, but these scribbles aren't gonna become a tranquil portrait of the Pacific Northwest. What happened? How did you do that? Bob, you're a wizard. Obviously, all this programming costs money. So where exactly does the money come from? Supposedly, it comes from viewers like you, but viewers like you are cheap as hell, so that's not happening. So I just thought we would take a little bit of time and explore the history of PBS, how it works, and the impact it's had on the generations of Americans that have been watching it. Because I don't know about you, but I would not be the same person I am today without hearing the Arthur theme song at least once a day when I was a child, because that theme song is unbelievably good. And I can't play it right now because of copyright, but like Chance the Rapper at his peak did a remix of the song, and my god, it is so good. Just Google it. Here's a picture of the album. Just go to it. PBS feels like such a staple of TV that it's surprising it's only been around for half a decade. But all the major networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, they're all older than PBS. The only exception is Fox, who came around after PBS because Rupert Murdoch wanted to throw his hat in the TV ring. It started in 1986, which seems really late for Fox to get going. And also, I did the research. Quick side note, Fox has never had a picture of a fox in its logo. It's never had a mascot fox, which I think is... You're missing a huge opportunity there. Anyway, Fox debuted 16 years after the debut of PBS, which was in 1970. But PBS's roots stretch even further back than that. In 1954, National Education Television rocked the airwaves. And by rocked, I mean like rock a baby to sleep, not Van Halen. It was pretty mild. National Education Television, or NET, was the prototype for PBS. It was funded by a grant from the Ford Foundation, yes, that Ford, and in its early years didn't produce any original content. Does it sound familiar? Do you see a pattern in my videos? It served as more of a curator. It would find a bunch of educational videos and put them together and send them out to stations across the country. 5-hour and then eventually 10-hour blocks of programming were stitched together and then sent around to participating stations, which seems like a lot of work. It would be like if you went to every Simpsons episode and found the moral of the story part that only lasts 3 seconds, put those all put those all together and then I don't know what I was saying. It wasn't a great watch, but it was a TV with a purpose. This overall was a pretty big deal. Keep in mind, this was before the invention of cable television. Back then, there weren't a lot of options to watch on TV. You had NBC, ABC, and CBS. They called it the Big Three. Anything else that people were trying back then was noted as baby shit. Get the fuck out of here, DeMont Network. No one even remembers you existed. Get out, scat! But now, due to NET, there was consistent educational programming, which of course, a lot of people made fun of. It doesn't matter if you're in 2020 or 1920, learning stuff is and always has been for dorks. Articles at the time called NET the University of the Air, and my research tells me that's the worst the 1950s could do in terms of being mean and toxic, which is such baby shit. But fuck it, if it works, it works. People are getting smarter and audiences are tuning in, so what's next? Well, by the 1960s, NET was creating original programming. Once again, it's a mirror image of what the fuck happened here. And some of the original programming was good, but there was an issue. Because it was publicly funded, that meant one dude with a lot of money decided what airs. Oh, it's this guy again. I'm sure he has no skeleton skeletons in his closet. I'm sure this guy is a completely rational adult. Some accused NET's journalism, and more specifically their documentaries about racism, to be biased. So that and a few other hot issues of the time led to Lyndon B. Johnson signing in 1967 the Public Broadcasting Act. This act did a lot of things, most notably the creation of NPR. But more specifically for this video, it was important because it created a nonprofit called the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. This new setup solidified NET as an actual production center and helped deflect accusations of publicly funded biased programming. And while this was all happening, NET had a rebrand and the Public Broadcasting Service was born. We made it, baby. A central channel that supported local stations across the country with content. And also, Lyndon B. Johnson had a huge dick. I don't know where to put that in this video, but I mentioned him a little while ago, and Lyndon B. Johnson had a huge goddamn hammer in his pants. Literally, there was like phone calls of him like calling his seamstress and saying, you need to let the area out in my pants so my dick can breathe, and also he would show his junk to other politicians as a power move. That has nothing to do with the rest of the video, but I needed to say that. You never know what you're gonna get when you open up a big Tugg classic. So with hundreds of local stations coming together under the PBS banner, the channel became a national staple, to overwhelmingly mild applause. Once again, they were playing some pretty lame shit on this channel. It was mostly like cooking shows for the women staying at home, and at this point in history, that's not sexist of me to say. They were doing that. And children's educational programming for the children of the women who are all staying at home. But they also did news, because this was the 1970s and everyone had a hard-on for local gossip. But for some, as soon as PBS launched, the same ethical questions that plagued NET were brought up against the new station. Opponents didn't think that a public service should be in the news business. Even some local stations that were connected to PBS expressed their concerns, thinking that it was going to create a controversy and get their funding pulled. And also, PBS had one very specific, super powerful enemy, Richard Nixon. Richard Milhouse Nixon, the 37th president of the United States. Yes, his middle name was Milhouse. Yes, I'm going to make a video eventually talking weird shit about presidents. So if you aren't aware, Nixon was generally a piece of shit, but most notably was extremely paranoid about the media talking about him. He thought that the big three networks were biased against him. Kind of like somebody I know, but I can't put my finger on their name. And the Nixon administration threatened to deny broadcasting license renewals for TV stations if they failed to cover him favorably. Which, Jesus Christ, can the government still do this? Can you say I'm gonna shut down your station if you're not nice to me? Kinda. They still can. Damn, that's wild. That's a bummer. Anyway, so naturally, Nixon viewed PBS as an enemy from its inception. Because they don't gotta worry about broadcast renewals because it's PBS. They don't gotta worry about none of that shit, baby. Something that especially irked him because of their government ties. It's like having a rat in your basement that keeps eating all your food and you can't do nothing about it. Then in 1973, Watergate happened. Watergate. I'm not gonna explain what Watergate is. That's gonna make this video like 9 hours long, but just Google it so you know how shitty it was. But the cover-up of Watergate by the Nixon administration was a huge scandal that nobody was talking about. It had massive political implications, but the big three networks couldn't do anything without the risk of losing their advertising funding. But you know who could talk about it? Wham blam, thank you ma'am. On the other hand, PBS has no obligations to its advertisers. So they were blabbing hard. They didn't just cover the Watergate hearings, they would record them live and then play them at night during prime time. The country was enthralled with the drama of these hearings, and PBS was literally the only station covering them. Due to everything I just said, Nixon resigned in 1974. And though he tried to cut funding for PBS, which I don't blame him, they were being meanies, they were being big old meanies, this scandal ended up putting them on the map, the exact opposite of what Nixon wanted. So from the Watergate scandal, we get rough men. So what a domino effect, Jesus Christ. But if the government was paying for PBS back then, you'd assume they're paying for PBS now, right? Well, kind of, but also no, because it's weird, because my videos used to be simple, and now they're fucking 20 minutes long, and there's so much shit moving that I can't even focus. The one video a week output is being destroyed by myself going down several rabbit holes every time I try and make one of these. But before we get into the money of PBS, let's get into the money of me. We're gonna run an ad. Play it, Johnny. Let's talk about oral fixation. A weird and heavy talking point, but we're gonna start with it. The definition of oral fixation is an obsessive, unhealthy behavior that involves the mouth. And an ungodly amount of people today are dealing with this issue. Habits are tough to break, especially if you go out to the bar and someone hands you one of those electric pacifiers. So the eggheads over at Fume came up with something that keeps your mouth both healthy and busy. Fume has created an award-winning flavored air device. And no, I didn't say vape. It's not a vape, because vapes are icky sticks that are filled with goo that makes your innards all weird. Vapes are like sticky Pepsi, and Fume is like an herbal tea, emitting vaporless flavored air that fills your mouth up with something that's delicious and flavorful. The design is sleek and weighted, so you can fidget with it when you're at a party that you don't know anyone at and you really want to leave, but your designated driver is half in the bag, so you gotta stick around for a little bit. And they've got tons of flavors like white cranberry, orange vanilla, or mint, and I stick with crisp mint because I'm boring, but maybe you're not, so you can try all the flavors. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and maybe you can be their next success story. Jesus Christ. For a limited time, use my code BIGTUG to get your free Fume base when you order the Journey Pack. It's the all-new magnetic stand for your Fume device, and you can spin your thing on it. It's pretty fun. Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com, and use the code BIGTUG or scan the QR code on the screen to get your free Fume base whenever you order the Journey Pack. Thank you for watching, and quit that dumb shit you be doing. Use this. It's a lot healthier.
This is PBS.
So the funding of PBS isn't as simple as daddy government bankrolls the child Muppets. I mean, even a lot of budget-conscious conservatives say that PBS is biased, too expensive, and shouldn't be funded. Ted Cruz would step on the neck of Elmo if he could. It also probably has something to do with the fact that Bert and Ernie are 100% fucking. That's not up for debate. Has that been confirmed? I feel like Sesame Street would call them gay by now. Sesame Workshop responded by asserting that Bert and Ernie have no sexual orientations because they are puppets. That's a fucking cop-out. That's bullshit. I mean, the pig is fucking the frog. And in terms of funding, it's a lot more complicated than just pointing a finger at PBS. Because when people talk about PBS, they're actually talking about a collective of local TV stations. Shout out WGBH. Goddamn, I love Boston. Just like the rest of the government, the structure of PBS is absurdly complicated. And though each station has different levels of contribution, there are three essential sources for funds for the PBS. Number one is the government. Obviously, we've been talking about it this whole time. Uncle Sam does provide a lot of money to the Corporation of Public Broadcasting, that nonprofit I talked about earlier. That's pretty much NPR and PBS. In 2022, over $500 million went to that nonprofit, which seems like a lot, but in the time it took me to say that, we built 60 M1 Abram tanks. So, you know, money's made up when it comes to taxpayers. They just throw that shit around. But the Corporation of Public Broadcasting, aka CBP, is a lot more than just PBS and NPR. Oh my god, I almost got all of those out perfectly. The CBP does a whole lot more than just making Zaboomafoo. Government-run public safety and educational programs are also funded by the CBP. The CBP has funded grants to improve FEMA's warning system and given money to develop the Department of Education's Ready to Learn programs, whatever the fuck that is. So even though $500 million is going into this nonprofit, PBS says some of their stations only get 15% of their revenue from the CBP, although some smaller ones get 40%, but not all of the money's coming from them. And also, $500 million is not that much in terms of the government giving you money. To put it in perspective, Elon Musk's privately owned Tesla company has gotten $330 million in government subsidies since 2009. And that number balloons to $2.8 billion when you take into account the local grants and tax rebates. And he just makes cars that explode when you drive them off the lot. So like, what the fuck are we doing? So what's the real cost of PBS to a viewer like you? I'm gonna say that so many times in this video. PBS costs the average taxpayer $1.40 annually. So the government doesn't even really come close to fully funding PBS. The station gets 60% of its funding from private sources, half of which come from viewer donations. And where do these donations come from? Well, they're actually sourced from the 20th century's most effective form of fundraising, which is PBS threw its first pledge drive in 1975. They aired special programming like ski jumping championships and washed up 60 folk singers performing. Hot to trot television. And in between these programmings, a guy would come on the screen and say, please give us money so we can keep showing you ski jumping, please. And I guess that worked because they made $6 million in 1975, $29 million in today's money. Pledge drives are weirdly the lifeblood of public television. And much like Keanu Reeves, they haven't changed much over the last 4 decades. It usually consists of a famous person that's only famous to people over the age of 60 standing in front of a bunch of volunteers dialing phones. Then they hold whatever show you were watching hostage while they have a number at the bottom of the screen you can call to donate. This is also known by the common man as a ransom. The reasons why someone would donate to PBS is 1, to support their favorite channel and, you know, continue the TV shows that they enjoy watching. But 2, and more importantly, is little gifts. You get little gifts, insanely expensive gifts, but you get little gifts nonetheless. It's usually something absurd like a tote bag once you hit the $250 donation level. This whole concept is strange. It's like if I stopped all of my YouTube videos in the middle, looked you dead in the eyes and said, if you don't like, comment, and subscribe, this whole channel's going to shit. And then whoever does it the most, I just give them that painting I did last year as a fuck you. Number 3 kind of funding comes from the business daddies. 12% of PBS funding comes from independent businesses. This practice is known as underwriting, which is a roundabout way of saying sponsorship without it actually being a sponsorship. It's like if a local pizzeria sponsors the local Little League team for a summer. They have no say in what the lineup is, they don't call any plays, but at the end of the year, all the kids go and eat there, regardless of their record. They're just getting their name out there. They're just putting their logo on a little kid's back. The pizzeria in this analogy is Juicy Juice. Another 10% of funding comes from foundations, a majority of which are owned by big hitters, such as Bill Gates, Gates or Henry Ford, which we mentioned earlier. Fun fact, did you know your kids are being force-fed vaccination propaganda from an early age by Bill Gates because he funds PBS? That's not true, but I want to get that misinformation out there, so if we could clip that out of context, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. But this is a part of the PBS funding pyramid that I do not understand. Are billionaires funding PBS for like karma points, or is it something insidious? Because like there's gotta be a real reason here. Are they doing this just because they're worried about their hellish afterlives, or is there like a lower agenda? I mean, I'd say it's just for optics, but like if I hear the Ford Foundation underwrote Frontline, I'm not gonna think, oh, actually Henry Ford was pretty chill. All the anti-Semitism, whatever, doesn't matter. He said that Jews were responsible for jazz music, short skirts, and World War. Hey Henry, only one of those things suck. What is your whole deal? Quick note from the future. I googled Ford anti-Semitism to see if that was actually true and not just hearsay, and the first article is from PBS, breaking down all the shitty stuff you did. Insane. I don't know what to do with this information, but it's crazy that PBS is the first one to talk shit about him. Good for them. So when you think about PBS, you probably aren't wondering about organizational and funding breakdowns. You're thinking about shows, baby. You're thinking about Neil deGrasse Tyson dropping some intergalactic knowledge on your dumb ass. But I think it's important to go over just how important the programming has been on PBS throughout the years. Because goddamn has this free-to-play TV station produced some absolute bangers over its tenured history. They got the educational shows. I mean, out front and up first, we got Sesame Street. This show is incredible. They got a vampire with OCD. What the fuck is that character design? Sesame Street has been on the air since 1969, making it the public television show. The goal of the show was to use the addictive qualities of TV to teach, which sounds evil, but it turned out not to be, so that's good. Sesame Street is so old that it has seen unique, different eras of racism. It has chewed through the jawbreaker of hate crime. I mean, from the jump, it had an interracial cast, and a lot of people did not fuck with that. People did not like that at all. Mississippi actually banned the show in 1970 due to its racial diversity, which I think is funny because, I mean, the show takes place in NYC, Mississippi. There's gonna be some black people. Sorry, you yokel asses can't handle that. Honestly, considering the political landscape of the late 60s, early 70s, Sesame Street was pretty radical for its time. There was breastfeeding, lessons about race, Cookie Monster was hitting the pipe in a couple sods. All of this led to the fact that now when you try and pick up the first 2 seasons of Sesame Street today, there's an adult-only warning label on them. I think that's true. But the political boldness of these furry fucks did not stop there. In 2002, the South African version of Sesame Street introduced a Muppet with HIV, which is a sentence I never thought would come out of my mouth. Their name is Cammy, they're just like everybody else, and that's kind of the point. They got a blood infusion that was bad, and that's why they have HIV. They're only 5 years old, but, you know, we love Cammy. In 1983, when a main cast member of the show died, they actually killed him off on the show. They used his actual death to teach kids about actual death, which seems like a little too serendipitous. They might have killed him. A Katy Perry duet with Elmo also got banned from TV because the dress she was wearing was kind of slutty, which is fine, but like she was showing a lot of skin for a children's cartoon. Not really political, but I think it's important to say that these Muppets don't care about showing a little boob. But it's hard to say you don't love the Sesame Street cast because literally everyone alive right now has grown up with them. Sesame Street has won 222 Emmys, which is crazy, and it's something this guy's probably going nuts about. Oh, how about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? Next level television, let me tell you. I mean, out of context, Mr. Rogers seems a little suspicious. A Presbyterian preacher puts on a puppet show where he engages in dialogue with characters, carries on conversations with kids about their feelings, has indoor and outdoor shoes, lives alone with a fish tank, and he's obsessed with the mailman. Which, all that together, I would be looking around his cabinets looking for the manifesto. But if you're trying to dig up dirt on Mr. Rogers, good luck. This man was a goddamn saint. Every sweater he wore on the show, his mom knit. He sung a song in front of Congress in order to demonstrate the importance of public broadcasting to keep the channel funded. He even personally responded to every single piece of fan mail he ever received. And I don't even do that. I only answer some of my DMs because a lot of them are horny or call me a rat boy or both. Mr. Rogers tackled tough issues, but with a light touch that was genuinely effective. For example, in the 60s, white people would throw acid or nails into pools where black and white people were swimming together because things were so cool back then. But in 1969, Mr. Rogers very casually ended one of his episodes by inviting the neighborhood police officer, who was black, to soak his feet in the pool with him. That's badass. And on his show, he was constantly undercutting racists and sexism and all that bad shit just by doing little acts of kindness. The only thing I can't stand about this show is the neighborhood of make-believe, which was the little neighborhood he'd have inside of his house, which was very confusing and scary to me. This was the backdrop of all the puppet shows he would do in his house, and it was supposed to promote curiosity, and it was to stimulate imagination while solving real-world issues. But it just turned out to be like a weird liminal space where nothing was fully real, but nothing was fake either. And it was all ruled over a monarch called King Friday the 13th. What the fuck is going on, Mr. Rogers? And then we have literally all the other children's programming. Shows like Kratts Creatures, Clifford the Big Red Dog, and Arthur the goddamn Aardvark. Arthur is peak edutainment for any young viewer out there. It's been praised for tackling topics like cancer, dyslexia, autism. They covered the topic of homophobia because Mr. Ratburn turned out to be gay, which is great, but I don't know why sexually active rats keep showing up in my life. And it's the third longest animated running series on American television, right behind The Simpsons and South Park. And there's all these shows that I don't have time to jump into, but they all banged in their own ways. But actually, there's one show that no one remembers. It was probably on for maybe a year, maybe two, but it was about a Chinese cat. And I think it was Sagwa, and the theme song has been stuck in my head since I was 6 years old. I've been whispering Sagwa is my best friend while I've been having sex my entire life, and I don't know, my therapist doesn't know what to do with me anymore. And of course, PBS has programming for adults too. It's not just catered to kids. We got Nova, the mind-melting crazy shit. I always confuse this show with a nature program. I get a little stoned, sit down with a snack, and think I'm gonna watch some cheetah running gracefully through a field, and then all of a sudden Neil deGrasse Tyson comes out and just makes me feel stupid for an hour and a half. It's just crazy in the morning that Elmo will teach me what the letter A means, and then at night I'm learning quantum physics. That just doesn't seem right to me. Then there's the Antique Roadshow, which if you aren't aware of it, it is one of the best shows on television. There's something that happens with age, that the monetary value of things becomes very important to you. And because of that, a show like Antique Roadshow is going to tickle your pickle unlike anything has ever done. The premise of this show is you bring your junk that's really old and a guy tells you if it's worth any money or not. 9 times out of 10, it's not worth any money, and it should have been a red flag when you saw the word Costco printed on the side of it. But sometimes people show up and their shit's worth thousands of dollars, and that's so exciting to me. And then we have every Ken Burns documentary. I mean, he did the Vietnam War, he did baseball, he does a bunch of American-based documentaries, and all of them are about 3 years long. All of them are a little too long, but they're informative, they're interesting, and they're the perfect go-to-bed shit, because they're pretty quiet. He almost whispers through all of them. And then we have instructional shows, like they have workout tapes on PBS sometimes, and they are skewed to the older viewer. A lot of them are like how to work out in a chair, but that's exactly what I need. And then we have Bob Ross. How could you forget Bob Ross? My God. If you don't know, and you're ridiculous for not knowing this, The Joy of Painting was a show with Bob Ross where he would just paint in front of you, and it was orgasmic. He'd encourage you to paint along with him, but people rarely did. They just wanted to see this wizard make magic on the canvas. And then sometimes it would just cut to him like feeding a baby squirrel with a bottle. He would be bottle feeding a baby animal sometimes. And I don't know if he like wrote that into the show or if some days he would just show up with a squirrel and say, film me while I do this. Either way, it was perfect television. And then there's all this British shit that they keep winning awards for, and I get it confused because like Downton Abbey is a PBS show, even though it seems like it should be from the BBC. The BBC is like the PBS of Britain, so it's very confusing to me. But all that being said, the cultural impact that PBS had over generations, it cannot be understated. It still continues to this day, and who knows what next banger they're gonna push out. Perhaps Downton Abbey 2, where they all discover opium, or Bluey in America, which I would kill somebody for. At the end of the day, we should all just be happy that PBS is free. I mean, not really, but technically. I mean, you're not paying for it, I'm not paying for it, so it's free. So the next time you're at your parents' house or at a hotel, flip to PBS and see what's going on there, because it might be the next big thing. New videos every Saturday. Shout out PBS, shout out viewers like you, shout out Fume. Use code BIGTUGG in the link down below for your free stand for your Fume device, and everyone just have a good day, okay? I'm gonna take a nap. Oh my God, I'm so tired.